This is Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Here are your hosts, Dr. Tim Slecker and Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, educated educators talking education. Hey, listen up. Welcome to Busted Pencils. We got a class in session. That's right, folks. Class in session. A special one today with a guest. But before we jump right into it, Jess, how you doing this morning?
You know what? I'm doing pretty well, Johnny. It's been a lot, and I've really been trying to take in the lessons that we've been talking about here of setting aside that time to make sure that I can be a regulated adult in the room, especially with my teaching that I do, so that I can come in and be my best self. So I've been really careful with it in these past couple of weeks to turn off the news when I'm not at work, give myself space, so that I'm ready to go. And you know what, Johnny? I am so excited to be here for class in session. This midweek episode, always one of my favorites, getting to talk to an educated educator doing wonderful work in the world of education. But before we get into that, how are you, Johnny?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. You know my vibe. I'm all about that staying regulated and things. And, I'm working with teachers all throughout the week. So they help keep me energized, being around young people who are excited to navigate these kind of, as we can put it, tumultuous times. Also for our listeners, just a reminder, just as to not be, too focused on the news while she's at work. Well, part of her job is like getting the news out. And
That is true. That is true.
You're
Yep.
there. So it's good that you're finding that balance. Let's dive right into it today, listeners, because we got a great class in session with the guest. Without any further ado, let me introduce him. He is an educator turned entrepreneur who saw a massive gap in education technology and decided to fill it. We got with us today Chris Hall, co-founder and president of Otus, took his experience in the classroom and built a platform that connects student data, assessments, and instruction all in one place. I love this. What started as a solution for his own middle school students has now grown to support over 1 million learners across 200 districts. As both an innovator and a parent, Chris is on a mission to ensure that educators and families have the insights they need to help every student be successful. Welcome to Busted Pencils. Our guy here, Chris Hall. How you doing?
Doing well. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited the weather is warmer in Chicago. It's like 50 degrees warmer. It's all the way up to 46.
There we go. That's right. It's getting warmer everywhere. I know we're experiencing flood warnings. Hopefully you're not getting too flooded. I know Chicago doesn't have too many flood problems, but some of our listeners in low places, not in like low cultural places, but in low elevation, they know about this because the snow is melting. It's coming down. The river's rising, but hey, it's warmer out. So we're going to stick to that and enjoy it. So Chris, many ed tech platforms kind of claim to personalize learning, right? That's a big thing. I know we've got to talk over the past about like one-to-one programs and things like that. But in reality, they can't, like, sometimes teachers are like, this is just too complicated. There's too many things. Talk to us a little bit about, like, I know I introed it. You started Otus. You have this kind of experience. Tell us about Otus and how does it make, teaching, how does it bring value to what teachers are out there navigating?
Yeah, I think the biggest struggle teachers face is they don't have enough time. I think they have the desire, they have the passion, they have the want to be able to connect to all their students. But, when I was a 7th grade social studies teacher, I had 150 students. How am I going to really personalize 150 lessons? And so Otus really allows you to kind of group kids and differentiate and all of a sudden really get a sense of who they are and who they were so that you can really address what they need to do. And we do that by putting all of this information in one place, as you said it much more eloquently than I did. But really, our goal is to be able to streamline some of this information. The insights that your colleagues might have had the year before, the insights they might have had, we want to be able to capture those so that we're not constantly rediscovering this about our kids. We can kind of build off of what we already know, and we can really tap into the true potential of each student. And Otus does that by, instead of jumping around to 10, 12 different places, hey, have one jump off point. Still use some resources that can be from a variety of places, but it kind of gives you that home base and it gives you a place to really start.
And I love that. I'm kind of reminded in this past flu season of my chart, right? Like no matter where I go to the doctor, they kind of have this the medical practitioners have all this information about me. And I know folks worry about information and like privacy and that stuff, but I land on the side of, man, in this age, everything is obtainable. There's all kinds of digital information, but I liked my health practitioners having info on my past health, having everything easily accessible to me and to them. And so that's kind of, maybe a little corollary for folks who aren't in education out there. Otis helps bring this stuff together for teachers, compile it into one place. Because I can remember, and I'm going to ask you to think back to your teaching time, but I can remember we'd always have these, meetings, usually over some coffee, sometimes, sometimes a happy hour, but you'd meet with the grade below and the grade above, and you'd kind of share notes. You'd sit down and you'd go through, yeah, we're old man here, listeners, if you haven't realized that yet. We're an old generation of teachers, but we used to have spiral calendars and kind of notes all in them and all kinds of things that we'd bring to those meetings and talk about, where students each were at, what they needed, kind of what we got covered that year, what they were ready for the next year. And so it was time consuming. And, to be honest, it happened at maybe like, I'd say like 30% efficiency, because we were mostly socializing and talking about a few high need students, which isn't bad, but there were a lot of ways that certain kids could slip through the cracks. So I love this kind of thing. Chris, thinking back to your teaching, I mean, like your aha moment, like how do we get from Chris teaching 150 social studies students figuring out, like, I think I got an idea, to helping all these teachers around the country?
No, I think you highlighted one of the key meetings that was the aha moment. We called them articulation meetings. They happened during the last week of school, and you would all of a sudden, I was the seventh grade teacher. I would meet with the sixth grade team. They'd run through the list of sixth graders, and then we'd meet with the eighth grade team, run through the list of students. And you had like 75 minutes to get through 150 names. You're not focusing on 150, and you're not able to give, hey, Johnny loves hockey. He's going to be able to relate it to hockey. It's going to be really helpful. All of a sudden, it's like, no, you don't get that. You're getting your high flyers. You might get a couple things. Us teachers like to talk. We might be talking about what we're doing in the summer, taking away some of that 75 minutes. And all of a sudden, who's going to remember that information come next school year? You're just going to have these tidbits of notes. So it was during this meeting about, man, how can we be more efficient of how we articulate how a student is doing? Also, the other meeting that came into play was problem solving meetings, where all of a sudden we'd get into a room and you'd be like, hey, we're really struggling. Jess is not really able to disconnect from the news. She's really letting outside forces come into play, and it's distracting her from her work. How are we going to really keep her engaged? Well, we'd spend like 25 minutes like triangulating who is Jess, how is she doing in Johnny's room versus my room, and all of a sudden we didn't really get a problem solved until 20 minutes in. So Otus allows you to capture those notes that can live in a profile, just like you explained with the My Chart. And it really allows you to then, when needed, tap into it. Be like, oh man, Johnny sometimes misses school for hockey tournaments. Cool, that's good to know. But it also means when I'm relating something from, US history, I could relate it to hockey styles. Or I can, hey, let me give you this example. Or if all of a sudden I kind of know those ways to really engage with a student. And so for me, that aha moment was, how can I be more efficient and effective with my time? And that's always what I wanted technology to do. And I would have one-on-one meetings with my kids. And those one-on-one meetings were super valuable, but how could I scale that? How could I scale that insight to the fellow teachers I was working with, but also for my principal? How could we really say, hey, how are the hockey players doing versus the orchestra kids? Or how are my third graders with an IEP doing versus my third graders who are in our lunch intervention? Being able to ask and answer those specific questions is really what Otus allows you to do.
And I love this, Chris, because so often, listener, we hear about data that we have, and we're doing, meetings to aggregate data, to discuss data, and oftentimes we hear that in terms of test scores, and things like this. So this is helping give data a good name, Chris, because it's not just a number. There's some real, like you said, there's some real capturing of that important relationship stuff. The things that each of our students bring to our classroom that's unique, that helps a teacher when they have, 150 is generous. We got teachers out there, who have like 50 an hour for 7 periods, right? So thinking about this, like it is extraordinary to do great teaching, and we have a lot of great teachers out there.
to me, this is one of those things that helps document that for the teacher to say, oh, I just had a moment, with Johnny and about his hockey, and we learned about that. And I also know 6 other kids are in a similar thing. Let me look at that real quick and see the kind of data on that. That's more than just their test score and how they're doing. So we can really get into how to best support all of our students. I love this, Chris. Also, I can imagine, ideally, we all love to think about, our teachers are in their classrooms and they have a generation of the same teachers, right? So seventh grade teachers, seventh grade teacher, and the seventh and eighth grade team, they've been working together for 15, 20 years. That's ideal, but it's not always possible, right? There's a lot of change. There's a lot of movement in our schools. And sometimes that real important relational stuff goes away when a teacher goes away. So it's really helpful that, say, Chris, you got moved to a different grade or a different school in the district, or we're out for a year or something. Maybe your district does something awesome, like has a sabbatical where you go and do some work in a school or do some accreditation stuff. Boom. It doesn't matter. They still have that kind of information and things to pass on. So really helpful for school leaders out there. Chris, just picking your brain. I mean, your thumb's on the pulse of this stuff. So like, how I brought up data. We hear about data. We hear about data. Talk about, the connection between data and real student growth, and how like this kind of data that you have, helped so many teachers collect and maintain. Like how do you see it as value added?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we collect data just to collect the information, but we're not actually using it. And so one of the things we need to do is we're going to take the time out of a student's day to measure how they're performing. We need to make sure that we're going to use it. But how do we make it useful, actionable? And that's really what Otus helps you do. You're doing your normal day routine. You might give a formative assessment, you might give a pre-check, but you need to then look at, hey, how are my kids progressing on these skills? And it's really about giving the necessary context to that information and making it so that it actually fits into something that's going to be helpful. And that's where I think we often miss the mark, where how can we actually make what we're learning about kids actually translate to something that's going to make them better? Again, I know we're talking about it, and we had talked before the show about how you enjoy hockey. That's a cool little bit to know, but I could actually use that to streamline one of my lessons, to be able to say, hey, we just had the core four going on, and how were you so passionate? We all of a sudden can use a moment to get that engagement, because when engagement is high, you're all of a sudden going to see the growth. And in addition, we might then be able to use, let's say, a skill we're working on like math. And you might say, hey, what was the goal game average here? All of a sudden, you're now going to be willing to put forth that effort because you're curious, you're engaged. And that's what we're really trying to do, is trying to not add more work, not add more tools, but take what you already have to do and capture the information around it. We had talked about health earlier. If you wear a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or like a Garmin, that's keeping some really good information. We want to, and again, it's just wearing it. It's just on your wrist. You're just doing it. And that's also what Otus does. Like, you give your assessments right within Otus. So all of a sudden your classroom assessments are right next to your diagnostic assessments or your common assessments. So now you're not just looking at a single point, you're looking at a collection of information along with their actual work. Oh, this was their writing sample. Oh, this was their project or video. And that collection, that context allows us not to be like, well, I know Johnny's not just this one number, but that one number could kind of move the needle a little bit. Oh, I'm going to try this a little bit here. And so that's really what we want to do, is put everything into context so you can take action.
Yeah, Chris, this is awesome too. And having an ed tech guy here who's got such close relationship with what it's like to be a teacher is unique, and I think so important. And ed tech right now is booming. I mean, it's always been important, but I mean, it is just like boom, growing faster than most of us can even organize to kind of figure out how to use it in our classrooms. And that's not even getting into the AI aspect of stuff, right? And I think we talked about it before. Technology isn't good or bad, right? It's how we use it. It's how it's implemented into our classroom. You gave us some great examples of it, but how do you as an ed tech guy, especially as a creator and now like supporter and facilitator of this technology as a tool, Otus, how do you keep it as a tool that can be empowering? Like, what are some of the ways that you face those barriers or challenges that, oh, technology is bad?
I think you got to listen and you got to learn. I think you have to really, I was a teacher all the way until 2018, but I think it's important that we never forget that we have to understand where the classroom is at today. And it's important that that classroom is different. If we look in 2025, if we compare it to 2021, if we compare that to 2019, we're talking less than 6, 7 years here, and it's changed dramatically. And so, in order to really be a supplemental tool for teachers, because I believe full-heartedly we're never replacing a teacher. You're never going to get that connection without the teachers. But what we need to do is we actually have to solve the problems a teacher is facing. How can we make them more efficient and more effective? How can we help them? And that can go from helping families. If all of a sudden we know families have the information they need and we're all on the same page, that's great. How can we take that information that a teacher is gathering and ensure that it's getting to the administrator so the teacher doesn't have to do more work to all of a sudden re-enter it, double entry? All of that's the goal, is if we can have this comprehensive understanding of where a kid's been, where are they now, so we can see that progression and growth over time. If we can begin to be able to understand the diagnostic and predictive nature of how we get to where we want to go, all of a sudden we're moving in that direction. And so instead of having technology be something that's going to be a replacement for teachers or something that's going to add to their workload, we need to listen and learn to how it's going to help them. And when you do that, then people get excited. Then people are happy to have that addition to their life because it's making it better instead of making it harder.
Yeah, I love this, Chris. One of my favorite things, and I'll put my parent cap on. I already have my hat on, but put my parent cap on. As a parent, I think this is such a nice thing too, because I think you were alluding to, like, parents can see this too. And so, there's a lot of different programs out there, and most districts have some online form of seeing grades, right? Where I can look at attendance and grades, maybe even some test scores or something there, or I have those from conferences or whatever. But I have a lot of numbers about my kid, right? And I think as a parent, what's really nice is also to be able to have something that said, like you gave that example, Johnny really likes hockey. I can see there's some success when I connect it. When I know that that our children are seen as more than a number by their teachers and by their school community, it just means something more to me. We talk to a lot of parents who, struggle with their them feeling like their students are valued in schools, or that they matter, or that they're seen, they're valued. That, as parents, we get to see the unique things our kids have, but we always wonder, is that recognized and valued at school? And this is one of those ways, because I do believe, and I tell parents this all the time, teachers care. And they are spread so thin often that they might not have a mechanism or a way to share with you that they notice this really exciting thing about your kid. They are noticing it. Believe in your teachers. Your teachers are drawn to teaching because they truly love kids and lots of different kinds of kids in their classrooms, and they're working. But Chris, this kind of captures that moment. So I love that opportunity that doesn't put more on the teacher, but then the teacher sees and makes those connections, can document it and share it in a way that it gets out there. Love that stuff, Chris. Lastly, I want to ask you, and I ask this of our listeners often, your favorite story of seeing Otus in action, like just one that stands out to you that just like, boom, that's the example.
Yeah, I think if you were to ask, I mean, so much of what you just talked about resonates, but if you were to ask your kid as they get off the bus, what did you learn in school? They're not giving you very detailed or descriptive answers. They're talking about the recess. They're talking about the latest hijinks has happened at the back of the bus. It's amazing to hear all of a sudden, a family member saying like, oh, I could see within Otus the ability that, hey, my third grader is learning to understand why a character's traits are motivating or changing their decision making in a story. And I always use the Harry Potter example, but like, why does Harry Potter always go to see Hagrid, even though everyone tells him not to? Well, if you can understand that motivation, you're actually working on a skill that's happening in your classroom. As a parent, they're not going to tell me that. They're not going to tell me they're working with that. So that insight all of a sudden means we're rowing in the same direction. And it's not just a number, right? It's the skill, it's the words. You could also, it's really that same student might have taken a test and they only took, instead of taking 40 minutes, which they normally do, they only took 9. All of a sudden you can say, hey, did you try your best? Did you reread through it? You're not accusatory. You just have this little bit of tidbit of information that allows you to converse with them. And those conversations are the best success, where all of a sudden you're able to really see at an individual level that we're better able to connect what's happening. And all of a sudden, you're going to then take that in the same school district, and they're really able to curb chronic absenteeism because they have that engagement from the families to the students to the educators all in one. And really, that's when you know you're having those aha moments more consistently.
All right, Chris, this is awesome stuff. Where can our listeners get more? Direct us to where we can all learn more about Otus.
Yeah, definitely. So that's otus.com. So otus.com, organizing technology for us, right? So that we're all being able to be organized, streamlined, and ready to go. And there you can learn a lot more information of what we do, how Otus is a tool that can help do this, how our AI assistants, like a college professor having like 5 TAs, and now you as a kindergarten teacher or third grade teacher, you now have a set of assistants, again, all supporting your work with kids, giving that insights to administrators and also families.
Awesome, Chris. Hey, thanks for busting pencils with us today. It's a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for taking your experience as a teacher and amplifying it to help so many other teachers. Really appreciate you.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
And now for your moment of Zen. There are people everywhere who want to see a different kind of world, who think that people in other countries are human beings as we are, and that if somebody is suffering anywhere in the world, we have a responsibility to help them.
Oh, listeners, thank you for listening to Busted Pencils Class in Session today with Chris Hall, and for grabbing podcasts like this one and other special Busted Pencils content on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course on the Civic Media website or wherever it is you get your pods. Hey, and don't forget to find free throws and face-offs on Friday and to catch Busted Pencils live at 3 p.m. Central Time across all the Civic Media Network stations for an hour of your favorite blue-collar scholars, Tim and Johnny. Keep busting pencils.